Hello dear Daily Renewal family. Thank you for clicking on this video. The testimony I will be sharing with you now is a warning that God gave to us, and is very important that you watch this to the end, so you won't miss the most important part of this message. This is a testimony we received from a man who passed away during a surgery that got critical, and in that moment what he experienced was terrifying. And today he wants to tell the world about his experience and what everyone should pay close attention to before it's too late. I pray many will see this video. And please, if you are already watching this, please don't hesitate to like this video so that YouTube will share this message to more other people who need to hear this. Before I share this message, we would love to know where you are listening from. The reason why we ask for your location is to put you and your country in prayers. If you've done that, may God bless you. Now listen and be blessed. I will start sharing the experience. I want to be careful how I start this, because I know what this sounds like. I know people are going to listen to this, and some of them are going to scroll away. Some of them are going to laugh. Some of them are going to say he's probably just making it up, or maybe it was the medication, or maybe his brain was just doing strange things from the lack of oxygen. I understand all of that. I have said every single one of those things to myself over and over again since this happened to me. But I am 54 years old. I have lived a long enough life to know the difference between a dream and something real. I have had dreams my entire life. I know what it feels like to wake up from a dream, confused, trying to hold on to pieces of it before they disappear. This was not that. This was the opposite of that. I woke up from this experience more clear than I have ever been in my life. Every single detail was sharp. Every single thing I saw, every single thing I felt, every single thing I understood in that place. I still carry it with me right now, as I am writing this to you. I am sharing this for the first time. I want you to understand that. Since this happened to me in late 2025, I have not told this story to anyone online. I have barely told it to the people closest to me, and even with them, I only gave small pieces, because every time I tried to explain it, I could see their faces. I could see them trying to be kind while also not quite knowing what to do with what I was saying. And I stopped. I stopped talking about it, but something has been pressing on me lately. I do not know how else to describe it, except that it feels like pressure, like when you know you are supposed to do something and you keep putting it off, and the longer you put it off, the heavier it sits. That is what this has felt like. So here I am. I am not going to use my name. I have thought about this carefully, and I want to keep my identity private, at least for now. This is not because I am ashamed of what I experienced. I am not. It is because I have a family. I have people in my life who I do not want to see harassed or mocked because of what I am about to share. I hope you respect that. What I want to share with you is what happened to me on the operating table. What happened when my heart stopped. What I saw during the 17 minutes that the medical team was working to bring me back. I am not going to stand here and claim that I have all the answers. I am not a preacher. I am not a theologian. I am just a man who was sick for a long time, who went in for surgery, and who did not come back the same person who went under. What I was shown during those 17 minutes was not about me. It was about the world. It was about things happening right now. It was about patterns. I think that is the best word I can use. Patterns of events that felt like they had already been written down somewhere long ago. I was not given exact dates. I was not given a timeline with a beginning and an end. But I was shown things unfolding. I was shown the shape of where things are going. And when I came back and started reading my Bible again with fresh eyes, the things I read lined up with the things I saw in a way that I cannot explain away. I am asking you to stay with me through this. If you have ever wondered whether there is something beyond this life, if you have ever looked at the news and felt like something is building towards something, if you have ever felt that nagging feeling that we are living in a significant moment in history, please stay with me, because what I am about to tell you, I believe with everything in me, is something you need to hear. Before I tell you what I saw, I need to tell you how I got there, because the road to that operating table was a long one, and I think that road matters. I was first diagnosed with a condition called Crohn's disease when I was in my late 30s. For those who do not know what that is, it is a disease of the digestive system. The intestines become chronically inflamed. Over time, that inflammation causes damage, serious damage. Scar tissue builds up. Sections of the intestine can narrow. You can develop what they call strictures, areas where the intestine becomes so narrow and so damaged that food and waste can barely pass through. You live with pain that most people cannot understand unless they have experienced it themselves. You have surgeries to remove damaged sections, and then you wait to see if the disease comes back in another part of the intestine. And it usually does. It usually finds somewhere else to go. For roughly 15 years, that was my life. Flares and remissions, medications that worked for a while and then stopped working, hospital stays, procedures, emergency room visits in the middle of the night because the pain had become unbearable. I am not telling you this to ask for sympathy. I am telling you this because I want you to understand that by the time I went in for this particular surgery in late 2025, my body had been through a long war. I was tired in a way that goes past just physical tiredness. I was tired in my bones and my spirit. I had spent so many years managing this disease, fighting this disease, just trying to hold my life together around this disease, that somewhere along the way, I had stopped really living. I was just surviving. The surgery was supposed to be a relatively standard resection. They were going to remove a section of the small intestine that had become too damaged and too narrowed to function. I had been through similar procedures before. Not exactly the same, but similar enough that I was not terrified. I was nervous the way anyone is nervous before surgery. But I was not afraid of dying. I want to be honest about that. It did not cross my mind in a serious way that I might not wake up. I thought this was just another step in a long line of steps. I thought I would go under, they would do what they needed to do, and I would wake up in the recovery room and start the slow process of healing. That is not what happened. I remember being in the pre-op room. I remember the lights above me, very bright, white and flat. I remember the nurse going through the checklist, asking me the same questions I had heard so many times before. I remember the anesthesiologist coming in and explaining what he was going to do. I remember feeling the medication start to move through the IV in my arm. There is a particular sensation when the anesthesia begins to work. It is not sleep exactly. It is more like a curtain slowly being drawn. The sounds around you start to soften. Your thoughts start to lose their edges, and then it is gone. What I want to tell you is what happened between that moment and the moment I woke up in the recovery room. I do not know exactly how long I had been under when my heart stopped. The surgical team told my family afterward that it happened during the procedure. My blood pressure dropped suddenly and severely. There was significant blood loss that they had not anticipated. My heart went into a state where it was no longer pumping the way it needed to pump. They had to stop what they were doing and work on keeping me alive. For 17 minutes, my heart was not functioning properly, and my brain was not receiving adequate blood and oxygen. For 17 minutes, by every clinical measure that matters, I was in a state of clinical death. I did not experience any of that the way they described it afterward. What I experienced during those 17 minutes, I am going to try to explain as carefully as I can. I know that words are not enough. I know that language was not built for this, but I am going to try. The first thing I noticed was stillness, not silence exactly, because there was something present that I could feel, even if I could not quite hear it yet. But the pain was gone. That is the first thing I want to say clearly. For 15 years, I had lived with pain somewhere in my body almost every single day, and in that moment, it was simply gone. Not reduced, not managed, gone, as though it had never been there at all. And the relief of that was so complete, so overwhelming, that for a moment that was the only thing I could process. Then I became aware that I was not where I had been. I want to be careful here because I have read other accounts of experiences like mine, and some of them describe flying through tunnels or rushing through light or dramatic scenes. My experience was not like that. It was quieter than that. It was more gradual than that. I became aware, and that is really the best word I have, aware, of being present somewhere that was not the operating room. There was no dramatic transition that I can point to. There was no moment where I felt myself leave my body with a jolt or a rush. It was more like I simply became conscious in a different place, like waking up somewhere new and realizing you are there before you even open your eyes. But I did not have eyes in the way I am used to having eyes. I want to try to explain this because I think it is important. When I look at something in this life, what I see is limited. I can only see what is directly in front of me. I have to turn my head. I have a specific angle of vision. In this place, whatever this state was, my awareness was not limited in that way. I was not looking at things. I was perceiving them, all around me and all at once. I was conscious of light, not blinding light, not harsh light, but a warm and full kind of brightness that felt like it carried something inside it, something living, something that was aware of me just as I was aware of it. And I felt something that I honestly do not have the right word for in English. The closest I can get is that I felt known, not just recognized, like someone seeing your face. Known, like every part of me, every mistake I had ever made, every wound I had ever carried, every small and private fear I had ever held in the middle of the night. All of it was completely visible and completely understood, and none of it was held against me. The feeling of being fully known and fully accepted at the same time is something I have thought about almost every day since I came back, because in this life, those two things rarely go together. Usually the more someone knows you, the more complicated it gets. But in that place, being fully known felt like being fully loved, and that feeling, that specific feeling, is the thing I miss most about that experience. I was in this state of awareness for what felt like some time before I began to see things, or rather, before things began to be shown to me, because I want to be clear that this was not something I was doing. I was not choosing what to look at or where to go. Something was being given to me. Something was being shown to me deliberately, carefully, like a hand pointing at something and waiting for you to understand what you are seeing. The first thing I was shown was something that took me a few moments to recognize. I was seeing the world from a perspective I had never had before. Not from space exactly, but something like that. I was aware of the earth below me in a way that was not physical, but was somehow still very real. And as I looked, my awareness was drawn toward one particular part of the world with a kind of gentle but unmistakable force. The way your attention is pulled toward a bright light in a dark room. You cannot help but look. You do not choose it. It just draws you. And what I was drawn to was a small piece of land in the Middle East. I want to stop here for a moment, because I know that some of you reading this are going to have strong reactions to what I am about to say. Political reactions, religious reactions, and I want to be honest with you. I did not go into that operating room with a strong theological position about Israel. I was not someone who spent a lot of time thinking about Bible prophecy, or geopolitics, or the significance of Jerusalem in end times theology. I was a sick man who was tired and who just wanted the surgery to go well, so he could go home. So, when I tell you that in this experience, the first major vision I was given was centered on Israel and Jerusalem, I am not telling you that because I had a pre-existing belief I wanted confirmed. I am telling you because that is what happened, and I am committed to telling this honestly, even when I know it is going to be complicated. What I saw, or rather what I was shown, was not an image of Israel the way you would see it on a news broadcast. It was more like an understanding that settled over me. The best way I can describe it is like being handed a key and suddenly understanding what it unlocks. I was made to understand that this small nation, this small piece of land, was at the center of something enormous, not just historically, not just religiously, but right now, in the present moment, in the season that the world is currently in. I was shown nations surrounding it, Not just the nations physically near it, but nations from all over the world, powerful nations, with their attention fixed on this one place. I was shown arguments about it, decisions being made about it, military positioning around it, political debates in the halls of powerful governments about what should happen to it, who had claim to it, what its borders should be, who should control its holy sites. All of this was being shown to me, not as a news report, but as a reality I was being allowed to feel the weight of. And the weight was extraordinary, Jerusalem especially. I was shown Jerusalem as something beyond a city. I could feel, and this is going to be hard to explain, I could feel that this city carried a significance that went beyond anything human, not just religious significance, the way people usually mean when they say that. Something deeper than that. Something that connected heaven and earth in a way I did not fully understand, but could deeply feel. And I was shown that this city was at the center of a conflict that was not just a human conflict. There was something older happening there, something that had been building for a very long time. I was not shown who was right or wrong in these conflicts. I want to be clear about that. I was not given a political position to bring back with me. I was not shown that any one group of people was better or worse than another. What I was shown was the significance, the centrality, the fact that in the period I was being shown, it seemed like every major decision in the world somehow curved back toward that small land eventually, like everything was in orbit around it. And then I was made to understand something that reached me in my chest rather than my mind. The understanding came in the form of recognition, like suddenly remembering something you had forgotten a long time ago. What was happening around Israel was not random. It was not just the result of political history or resource conflict or old religious rivalries. It was the unfolding of something that had already been described, something that people who read the Bible with serious eyes had been pointing to for a very long time. I am not a prophecy expert. I am not going to stand here and give you a verse-by-verse breakdown of what Scripture says and how it connects to what I saw. But I will say this. When I came home from the hospital and I opened my Bible, certain passages about Jerusalem, about nations gathering, about Israel being at the center of the world's final chapters, I read those passages and I felt the same weight I had felt during the experience. And that has not left me. After the vision of Israel settled in me, I was shown something else, and this one was harder to receive. I was shown conflict. Not one conflict, not one war in one place, but conflict spreading across the world in a way that felt like a pattern. I am going to try to describe this without making it sound more dramatic than it actually was, because the way it was shown to me was not dramatic. It was quiet and heavy and almost matter-of-fact. Like being shown something that is simply true, not something designed to frighten you. I was shown regions of the world where fighting was ongoing or intensifying. Not specific battles with dates and locations, but the shape of it, the feel of it. Multiple places at once. Some of them connected to each other in ways that were not obvious. Some of them separate, but all of them adding up to something. The overall feeling was of a world that was unable to settle into peace. A world where, just when it seemed like something might stabilize, somewhere else would ignite. What struck me was not just the volume of conflict, but the nature of it. There was something underneath all of it that felt deeper than political disagreement or territorial dispute. I was made to feel the brokenness underneath. The way old wounds between nations and peoples had never really healed. They had just been managed, and the management was wearing thin. The anger that had been compressed for generations was finding new ways to come out, and the technology that humans had developed, technology that could have been used to solve problems, was also being used to fight, to track, to target, to spread fear and division with a speed that no previous generation had been capable of. And I was shown something that I have thought about many times since. I was shown that even the nations that were not actively at war were living in a state of low-grade tension that was exhausting. People everywhere Not just in war zones, we're living with a background anxiety about what might come, about what was building. Governments were speaking about peace while preparing for war. Leaders were negotiating while simultaneously positioning military resources. The whole world felt like it was holding its breath. I was made to understand during this part of the vision that this was not going to resolve itself the way previous generations of conflict had resolved. Previous wars had ended. Previous crises had stabilized. Nations had rebuilt. There had been periods of recovery and relative calm. What I was being shown felt different. It felt like a compounding, like each new layer of instability was being added to the layers that had come before it, without any of those layers ever fully clearing, like the world was accumulating weight and had been for some time, and the accumulation was continuing. I am not saying this to frighten anyone. I want to say that again. When I was being shown this, I was not afraid. I am not sure I can fully explain that, but the state I was in during the experience was not a fearful one, even when the things being shown to me were heavy. It was more like the kind of understanding you reach when you finally admit something to yourself that you have been avoiding. It is not easy to face, but there is a kind of relief in finally seeing it clearly. That is what this felt like. And I was made to think, in the middle of this vision, of words I had read years ago and mostly forgotten. Wars and rumors of wars. That phrase came back to me during the experience with a force I did not expect. I had read those words before, and they had always seemed to me like ancient history, the concerns of people who lived in ancient times. But seeing what I was being shown, feeling the weight of what the world was carrying, those words felt like they had been written for this exact moment, not as a prediction designed to frighten, but as a description, an accurate description of a season that human beings would eventually enter. I believe we have entered it. The third thing I was shown came more gently than the second, but in some ways, it stayed with me longer. I was shown people, not specific individuals, but people in general. Life as it was being lived in this moment in history, and what I saw broke something in me that I am still trying to put back together. What I was shown was a kind of emptiness spreading through the way people were living. Not poverty, not physical emptiness, something internal, something that lived inside the chest and behind the eyes. I was shown people who were more connected to each other through technology than any previous generation. People who could reach anyone in the world at any moment of the day or night, and yet I was shown profound loneliness. Not just occasional loneliness, the way all human beings have always experienced it, but a deep and structural loneliness that was becoming normal. A generation learning to relate to each other through screens and devices and algorithms, and slowly losing the ability to truly reach each other in the ways that matter. I was shown relationships breaking apart. Families that were fragmenting not always because of dramatic events, but because of a slow wearing away of the things that held them together. Marriages ending, not necessarily from crisis, but from disconnection. Parents and children occupying the same homes while living in separate worlds. I was shown children growing up with more access to information than any children in history, and less access to genuine wisdom than perhaps any children in a very long time. I was shown a moral confusion that was spreading. I want to be careful here because I do not want to sound like I am judging people. That is not what the experience gave me. It gave me something closer to sorrow than to judgment. I was shown that the lines that had long existed around what was right and what was wrong, not just according to one religion or one culture, but according to something deeper and more universal. Those lines were being moved, not all at once, in a dramatic way, but gradually, steadily, in a direction that was leading away from something foundational. And what troubled me was not that people were choosing differently. It was that the very idea of there being a choice, of there being a real right and real wrong that existed independent of what any individual or any generation decided, that idea was being lost. And without it, people were making decisions in a vacuum, trying to build meaning in a space that had no walls, and finding that it could not hold. I was shown violence, not just war violence, violence in places that should have been safe. Violence between people who had no historical quarrel, who had never met, who simply crossed paths on the wrong day, and the result was destruction. A violence that felt unmoored from any real cause. A violence that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside people who had been given so many things, but had never been given the one thing they truly needed. And underneath all of it, I was shown a spiritual emptiness that I still struggle to describe. I was shown people who were busy, more busy than any previous generation in history, filling their hours with noise and activity and entertainment and distraction, and who were simultaneously, underneath all of that activity, desperately searching for something they could not name, something they could feel the absence of even if they could not identify what was missing. God, that is what was missing, not in a religious sense, not in a church attendance sense, but in a real and fundamental sense. The thing that human beings were created to be connected to, the source of their meaning and their dignity and their capacity to love. People were living as though that connection did not exist or did not matter, and the consequence of that choice was showing up everywhere. In the violence, in the loneliness, in the confusion, in the exhaustion. And I sat in that awareness for what felt like a long time, and I felt something that surprised me. Not anger, not condemnation. What I felt was grief. A deep grief that did not feel like my own. A grief that was much larger than me. And I understood that I was being allowed to feel a small piece of something that was felt about the state of the world. Not a cold judgment from above. Something much more like the grief of a father watching his children harm each other and themselves and being unable to stop them because he gave them the freedom to choose. I do not have words big enough for what I felt in that moment. But then something shifted, and I am grateful it did, because I am not sure I could have carried what came before without what came after. The heaviness did not disappear, but something began to move alongside it, and it was light, actual light, in my perception of it, moving across the world I was being shown, not replacing the darkness, but existing alongside it, cutting through it in places, finding ways into places I would not have expected. I was shown the message of Jesus spreading, not in a triumphant, dramatic way, not a single moment of global awakening, but something persistent and penetrating, something that was moving through technology and through human connection and through dreams and through small conversations in unexpected places, spreading across the world in a way that felt, honestly, miraculous when I considered what I had just been shown about the state of the world. I was shown people in places I would never have thought of, people in parts of the world that had been historically resistant to the gospel, people in circumstances I would not have imagined receiving this message, not always through official channels, not always through organized religion, sometimes through a phone screen, sometimes through a conversation with a stranger, sometimes through something they saw or heard that they could not explain, but that reached something deep inside them and awakened it. I was shown faces, not identifiable faces, not specific people I could name, but the expressions on those faces, the look of someone who has just found something they did not know they were looking for, but immediately recognize when they find it. I have seen that look once or twice in my life in this world, and it is unmistakable. I was shown it over and over and over, and I was made to understand something that gave me a hope I have carried back with me. The chaos I had been shown, the conflicts, the moral confusion, the emptiness, these things were not the whole story. They were real, they were happening, but alongside them, and even because of them, people were reaching, they were searching. The emptiness was driving some of them toward the very thing they had been told or had assumed did not exist or did not matter, and the message was finding them, across languages, across cultures, across every boundary that had traditionally slowed or stopped its movement. A word came to me during this part of the experience, not spoken aloud in any way I can describe, but present in my understanding as clearly as anything I have ever read or heard. The word was completion, like I was being shown a process in its final stages, like a harvest that had been planted long ago and was now coming to its fullness, the message reaching all nations, all people, every corner of the earth, before something ended. And there was urgency in that understanding, not panic, not fear, but urgency, the kind of urgency you feel when you realize that something important is close and that the time to act is now and not later. Then everything I had been shown began to connect. And this is the part that I have found hardest to talk about, because it is also the part that has changed me the most deeply. I was shown all four things at once, or not exactly at once, but close enough that I could see them as parts of a single picture. Israel at the center of the world's attention. Wars and instability spreading across the earth. Moral and spiritual decline cutting through the heart of society. And the gospel, the message of Jesus, reaching everywhere, finding people in the middle of all of it. And I was made to understand, with a clarity that felt like it came from somewhere far beyond my own thinking, that these were not separate events. They were not a collection of unfortunate coincidences happening at the same time in history. They were connected. They were, and I know how this sounds, they were the pattern, a pattern that had been described long ago, in language that people had read and debated and interpreted for centuries. And what I was being shown was that the description and the reality were matching up. Not in a way that gave me a specific date or a countdown. I was not shown that. I was shown the shape of things, the feel of where things were going, the sense that the world was in a chapter, a particular chapter, and that the chapter had been written before it was lived. When I was a younger man, I read the Bible the way a lot of people read it, on and off, selectively, taking what I found comforting and moving past the parts that confused me or made me uncomfortable. I never gave serious attention to the prophetic parts, the parts about what would happen at the end of this age. They seemed remote to me, like reading a history of a future that had nothing to do with my daily life. I cannot read those parts of the Bible that way anymore. The things I was shown in those 17 minutes, Israel being the focal point of global attention, wars, and the constant threat of wars across multiple regions, break down the things that hold human society together from the inside, and the simultaneous spread of the gospel to every corner of the world. All of it connects to passages I have now read and reread and read again, not to prove a point, not to build a theological argument, but because the recognition I feel when I read those passages is the same recognition I felt during the experience, and that feeling does not go away. I am not going to claim that what I saw was definitely a vision from God in a way that demands everyone's acceptance. I cannot prove that. I cannot prove any of this. What I can tell you is what I experienced and what I understood. And what I understood was that the events I was being shown were not random. They were not just the messy unfolding of human history. They were something that had already been described in a book that most people either do not read or read without expecting it to be true in a practical, literal sense. I left that experience with the conviction that the world is in a season that matters, deeply, urgently, in a way that should change how every person who is alive right now chooses to live their days. I do not know exactly how or when it happened that I began to return. There was no announcement. There was no voice saying it was time to go back. What happened was more like the awareness I had been in began to change. The visions began to recede. The feeling of being fully known and fully accepted began to fade, not all at once, but gradually, like the light at the end of the day when the sun is going down but has not yet disappeared. And I felt something that I can only describe as resistance, not panic, not screaming or fighting, just a deep reluctance. Because where I had been, whatever that state was, it was home in a way that this world has never been home. The absence of pain alone was enough, but beyond that, the peace of it, the completeness of it, the sense of being where you were always meant to be, giving that up to come back to this body with all its limitations and all its history of suffering was not something I wanted, but I did not have a choice about it. What I felt was something like being drawn back, the way a tide goes out and comes back in. I did not fight it. I did not even know how I would fight it if I had wanted to. I simply felt the direction of it, and then it happened. The sound was the first thing. The sound of the operating room coming back. Voices. The mechanical sounds of equipment. Urgent voices. Calm but moving quickly. I could hear them before I could feel my body. And then feeling came back. And the pain came back with it. Not all at once, gradually, like the volume on something being turned up slowly. And then I was fully back, lying on the operating table, unable to open my eyes yet, but aware that I was there, aware that I was in my body, aware that I had come back. The recovery room was confusing in a way I did not expect. People ask me whether I was glad to be alive, and I want to answer that carefully, because the truth is more complicated than a simple yes. I was disoriented. I was looking at the ceiling of the recovery room, and I was trying to hold on to what I had just experienced, the way you try to hold on to a dream when you first wake up. Except this was the opposite problem. The experience was not fading. It was completely clear. Every detail of what I had been shown was fully intact in my memory. What was confusing was this world. This world felt thin. That is the word that keeps coming to me. Thin. Like a piece of paper held up to the light, and you can almost see through it to what is on the other side. My family was there when I was moved to a room. I looked at their faces, and I felt a love for them that was more intense than anything I had felt before. Not because the experience had given me a new capacity to love, but because I had been shown, however briefly, what love really was at its fullest. And coming back, and seeing the people I cared about through that lens was genuinely overwhelming. I cried in a way that I could not explain to them at the time. They thought I was in pain or frightened. I could not tell them right away that I was crying because I loved them so much it hurt, and because I knew I had been given something during the time I was gone that I needed to find a way to give to them and to anyone else who would listen. There was a nurse who sat with me for a while in those first hours after I was moved out of recovery. She was older, quiet, the kind of person who does not feel the need to fill silence with words. She checked my vitals, adjusted something on the IV, and then sat for a moment near the window. I watched her without saying anything, and I thought about how extraordinary it was that this ordinary room, this ordinary woman doing her ordinary job, was somehow part of the miracle of me being here at all. I had never looked at a hospital room that way before. I had spent so many hours in hospital rooms across 15 years of illness, and they had always felt like places of waiting, of enduring, of getting through. This room felt sacred to me. I do not have a better word for it. The thin winter light coming through the window, the sound of the monitors, the weight of the blanket on my legs. All of it felt precious in a way I could not have explained to anyone without sounding strange. The weeks after I left the hospital were strange. I was physically healing, but I was also processing something that had no proper category in my regular life. I tried at first to treat it the way I imagined I would treat a vivid dream. Something happened, it was intense, it felt real, but it was not real in the way that the waking world is real. I tried to put it in that box. It would not stay there. Every time I attempted to dismiss it, every time I tried to convince myself that it was the result of the anesthesia or the blood loss or the brain doing what brains sometimes do under extreme stress, I would run up against the same problem. The clarity, the continuity, the fact that not a single detail had faded. I have had thousands of dreams in my life, and I cannot remember one of them in the kind of detail I can still access from this experience. Every image I was shown, every understanding that was placed in me, every single piece of it is still exactly as sharp and as present as it was in the recovery room on the day I woke up. That is not what dreams do. Dreams dissolve. This has not dissolved. This has stayed. I also started reading my Bible again, seriously this time. Not for comfort or habit, but because I needed to understand what I had been shown. And as I read, particularly the prophetic portions that I had always skipped past, the connection between what I was reading and what I had experienced became undeniable to me. I am not going to pretend it is scientifically verifiable. I cannot make that claim. But I am also not able to look at that connection and say it is coincidence. Too much of what I was shown is described in those pages. Too much of what is described in those pages is visible in the world around us right now. That connection does not feel random to me. It has never felt random to me since the day I came back, and so I have arrived here. After months of sitting with this, after months of telling small pieces of it to people close to me and watching them try to receive it, after months of feeling that pressure I described at the beginning, that sense of something needing to be released. Here I am, trying to put into words what I believe I was given for a reason. Not to frighten anyone. I want to say that one more time. This is not meant to create fear. Fear is not what I came back with. What I came back with was seriousness. A deep seriousness about the things that actually matter, about faith, about eternity, about the question of where we stand in relation to the God who made us, and who, I believe, is still very much present and active, even in the middle of everything that is happening. What I came back with is urgency, the kind of urgency that makes you want to talk to people, that makes you want to ask the people around you whether they are ready. Not ready in a panicked, running around screaming way, ready in the quiet, settled, from the inside way, the way you prepare for something important, not by worrying about it, but by doing the things that need to be done ahead of time. I came back with a desire to share the Word of God that I genuinely did not have before. Not as a religious obligation, not because I felt guilty, but because I saw what was coming and I saw what was available. I saw the darkness and I saw the light moving through it. And I understood that every person alive right now has a choice to make about which side of that divide they are standing on, and that the time for making that choice is not in some distant future. It is now. It is today. My own life has changed in ways I am still discovering. I am a different person than I was when I walked into that hospital. The priorities that used to organize my life feel distant to me now. Things I spent years worrying about no longer carry the weight they once did. Things I used to take for granted, the morning, a quiet conversation, the face of someone I love, these carry more weight now than they ever did before. I see everything through a lens that I cannot take off, a lens that reminds me, constantly, that what we can see is not all there is, that this life, as real and as significant as it is not the final destination, that there is something beyond it that is more real, not less real, than what we experience here. The 15 years of illness changed me in some ways, but not like this. Nothing has ever changed me like 17 minutes of death. And now I want to speak to you directly, you who are reading this right now. I do not know where you are. I do not know what you believe, or what you have been through, or what your relationship with God looks like. I am not going to assume anything about you. What I am going to do is tell you what I came back wanting to say. Please do not wait. That is the core of it. Do not wait to take seriously the question of where you stand with God. Do not wait to read the Bible and find out what it actually says. Do not wait until circumstances force you to think about eternity. Think about it now, while you have the luxury of choosing, while life is relatively stable enough to give you space for that kind of reflection. I spent years too busy to think about it, too caught up in managing my illness, too distracted by the demands of daily life, too comfortable, when I was comfortable, to feel any urgency. I am not criticizing myself for that. I am just being honest. I lived the way most people live, assuming there was time, assuming the important questions could be addressed later. Later came for me on an operating table in late 25. I was given another chance. Not everyone is given that. Some people go in one moment and do not come back. And what I was shown makes me believe, with everything in me, that the season we are in is one where that question, the question of where we stand with God, is not a question that can comfortably be postponed. I am not asking you to panic. I am not telling you the world is ending tomorrow. I was not given dates. I was not shown a specific moment. What I was shown was a pattern that matches what the Bible describes as the period leading up to something, And when I look around at the world right now, I see that pattern continuing to develop. Israel, conflict, moral and spiritual decline, the gospel spreading simultaneously, all of it moving together, all of it feeling, to me, like a picture coming into focus. I am asking you to take your spiritual life seriously. I am asking you to ask yourself honestly whether you are ready, not ready in a theoretical sense, ready in a real, personal, deeply settled sense. Do you know Jesus? Not as a historical figure, not as a cultural reference, as your Lord, as the one who died for you and who is alive. Do you know him that way? Because what I was shown in that place between death and life is that he is real, completely, absolutely, unmistakably real, more real than anything I have ever experienced in this life. The love I felt in that place, the sense of being fully known and fully accepted, that did not come from nowhere, that came from someone, and that someone is the same someone described in the pages of the New Testament. The same someone who has been calling human beings to himself across every century and every culture, and who is, right now, still reaching and still calling. He is not distant. He is not indifferent. He is not waiting for you to be good enough or together enough or religious enough. He is waiting for you to turn toward him. That is all. Just turn. I know what it is to waste years not turning. I know what it is to live with God as a background consideration rather than a living presence. I lived that way for most of my adult life. I am not judging it. I am just telling you that when I was in that place, I understood what I had missed. I understood the joy I had left on the table, and I came back with a burning desire not to go back to that way of living and to do whatever I could to help other people not miss it either. The things I was shown about the world are not meant to crush you. They are meant to wake you up. There is a difference. Being crushed leads to paralysis. Being awakened leads to action. And the action that is needed is not complicated. It is not a list of religious requirements. It is simple. Turn to him, read his word, let his love reach you, and then let that love change how you live, how you treat the people around you, how you spend the days you are given. Life is temporary. I know that in my bones, in a way I did not know it before. Every day I am alive now is a day I understand is borrowed, and that understanding does not make me afraid. It makes me grateful. It makes me intentional. It makes me want to use the time well. Because the time matters, more than most of us are treating it. I think about the visions I was shown often, not obsessively, but often. I think about the pattern. I think about the way everything seems to be moving. And I think about the question that I have sat with since the day I came home from the hospital, and that I will leave you with now. Everything I was shown during those 17 minutes, the things that are happening in the world right now, the way they connect to what the Bible describes, the sense of a pattern unfolding that was written long before we lived it. If what I saw is true, if the pattern I was shown is really moving in the direction it appeared to be moving, then how close are we, really? That is not a question meant to frighten you. It is a question meant to make you think, to make you honest with yourself about where you are and where you are going, to make you look at the world with open eyes and then look at your own heart with the same honesty. I died on that table for 17 minutes, and in those 17 minutes, I was shown things that changed the entire direction of my life. I am asking you not to wait for an operating table of your own. Whatever you need to do, whoever you need to talk to, whatever conversation with God you have been putting off, whatever page of the Bible you have been meaning to open, do it today. Not because tomorrow is guaranteed to be too late, but because today is guaranteed to be a gift. Use it. One more thing before I close. I know that some people who read this are going to be skeptical, and I genuinely respect that. I was a skeptical person myself for most of my life. I do not expect everyone to read this and immediately believe every word of it. What I am asking for is something smaller than belief. I am asking for honesty, for you to ask yourself, quietly, when no one else is listening, whether you have given serious thought to the questions that actually matter. Not whether you have checked the right religious boxes, not whether you attend the right building on the right day of the week, but whether you have honestly, personally, faced the question of who you are, why you are here, what happens when this life ends, and whether you are prepared for that. Those are not questions that require a theology degree. They do not require a specific church background. They require only honesty and a willingness to seek. And I believe that if you seek with a real heart, you will find. That is not just a religious sentiment. That is what I experienced. That is the nature of the presence I encountered in that place. It was not hiding. It was not playing hard to get. It was there, completely and fully there, for anyone willing to turn and look. I am 54 years old. I have been sick for a long time. I have had more time than most people my age to think about my own mortality. And still, it took 17 minutes of actual death for me to fully understand what I had been given in this life and what I had been too distracted to fully receive. I do not want that for you. I do not want you to need an operating table to wake you up. I want these words to do some small part of that work instead. So please, take the question seriously. Take the time seriously. Take the people around you seriously. And above all, take God seriously. Because He is taking you seriously. More seriously than you may have allowed yourself to believe. Everything I was shown during those 17 minutes, the things that are happening in the world right now, the way they connect to what the Bible describes, the sense of a pattern unfolding that was written long before we lived it. If what I saw is true, if the pattern I was shown is really moving in the direction it appeared to be moving, then how close are we really? Thank you for listening. If you have watched to this point, then this prayer is for you. May you not be exempted by what God planning to do for His people. You are blessed in Jesus' name. Amen.